Good morning. I just want to quickly thank Manolis for his kind invitation, and I've enjoyed every piece of this colloquium. So thank you very much to all of you. I will hurry up. I just want to this presentation. It's not the result, but it is some. I found some interesting data while studying the translation of Robert. A couple of years ago, I made a small comparative analysis between the Arabic text of the Qur'an, and I compared it to the translation of Robert. And then I found this, Omnes menstruatae sunt, and I was a little bit shocked about finding this in his translation of the Qur'an. Even though my results were somewhat different from my results were other than this translation, but I found that Robert translated this way. So, and I've never shared this bit of Robert's translation with anyone. So I figured out that it would be a nice place here. It would be a nice place to do so. So I'm gonna start. This, as you may see in the subtitle, has to do with the influence of the Tafsīr by Tabari in Robert's translation. So yeah, we may begin. I just wanna quickly note that the translation by Robert endured some harsh criticism between maybe the 15th century with Juan of Segovia criticism of Robert's translation, and this harsh criticism went on, and it didn't stop until the 20th century. We may see here some examples. I put Juan of Segovia makes a long criticism about Robert's translation. Some have argued, among them Ulisse Cecchini, who we have here, that Juan of Segovia, even though his criticism of Robert's translation is kind of harsh, he also it's very fair on his assessment of Robert's translation. And the main deal with Robert's translation on the eyes of Juan of Segovia is that Robert transformed the Arabic discourse into Latin discourse. We have heard this already in these days, and that is probably the main feature. Robert, as he acknowledges in his preface to his translation, he apparently thinks that the Qur'an it's badly written, it's bad prose. So he tries to fix this problem, and this is what Juan of Segovia remarks. You know, what in Al-Qur'an it's described in Arabic, he transformed it into his own locution mode, or yeah. After Juan of Segovia, the criticism goes harsher, and Colville acknowledges that you can barely find a line that matches the Arabic text of the Qur'an. Marrachi probably was the first who identified Robert's translation not with a translation but with a paraphrasis. And even though Robert indeed resorts to paraphrase in order to make his translation, we would be able to call it a translation and not a paraphrase. But yeah, this would be a matter of some discussion. en parlant, he just says that it is the worst of all translations of the Qur'an. And Alberni, even though she makes this quite good assessment of Robert's translation, she thinks that the translation is not more than bel infidèle. So as we may see, the criticism went on and on. In the late 20th century, we had a reappraisal of Robert of Ketton's translation, mainly by Thomas Berman, who recognized the influence of the Tafsīr in Robert's translation. And he is kind of, as opposed to the harsh criticism that the translation endured between the 15th and the 20th century, he is more kind with the translation. So he says things like this: Robert's paraphrase, for all its faults, is often a much more reliable guide than Mark's translation to what Muslims believe to be the meaning of the Qur'an. And he goes on and on. He wrote mainly two papers about this. Wherever we look in Robert of Ketton's version of the Qur'an, we find him adjusting his Latin text to make it reflect the Arabic tradition of Quranic interpretation. And the next one is interesting. The thoroughgoing paraphraser that he was, therefore, Robert nevertheless displays something of the scholarly, disinterested spirit that is often associated with much later periods. And he's very, very kind with Robert's translation. Just let me see. I won't read them all. Robert's version is in many ways a translation of the Qur'an as Muslims themselves read and understood it. This is quite an assessment, because when we see that Robert translated Omnes menstruatae sunt, we don't really find that he wanted actually to portray the Qur'an as Muslims understood it. So yeah, let's just go to the examples in order not to waste time. This analysis, I focused my analysis on the first 57 verses of his translation of chapter 12, Surat Yusuf, and I didn't expect actually to find many instances in which he resorted to the Tafsīr, but he does actually in some occasions, and I was able to point out mainly three uses he gives to the Tafsīr. He uses the Tafsīr in order to amplify a word or a period, in order, with information taken from the Tafsīr, in order to make it more clear. He clarified, in only one instance, he kind of clarifies the syntax and the meaning of a whole verse. We will see it next. Or he just plainly substitutes the text of the Qur'an with that of the Tafsīr. So, we have this example on his translation of 1249. He, in the Qur'an, says, عَامٌ فِيهِ يُغَاثُ النَّاسِ, and here's the translation: a year in which rain will pour upon the people. And Robert translates annus fructus setuvas laturus. So we don't find his translation in the Qur'an, but we do find it in Tafsīr's commentary. Tabari says, because in this year, they will extract grapes, oil, and all kinds of fruits. So we may see clearly that Robert resorted to the Tafsīr in order to make his translation, and we see him amplifying just a word. In this example, in the 12:5, we find him amplifying a period in the Quran, لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك فيكيدوا لك كيدا. Do not relate your dream to your brothers, for they will set up a trap for you. Robert translates, somnium hoc fratribus tuis ne rebelles, ne per invidiam tibi quicquam molestiae machinentur. So we don't have the per invidiam in the Quran, but we do have it also in. I found that he may have checked or remembered the text of the Genesis, because in the Genesis clearly states that his Joseph's brothers were envious to him, so they threw him down the well. And but we also find this allusion in the Tafsīr by Tabari, where he says that these things that are in brackets are Tabari words. So he kind of mixes his own. He puts the text of the Qur'an, and then he clarifies it with his own words. So God says, exalted be his remembrance, Jacob said to his son Joseph, O my son, do not relate this dream of yours to your brothers, for they will envy you. These are the words by Tabari. For they will set up a trap for you. This is the Qur'an. So, and we also find this small somnium hoc, which is not in the Qur'an, but it is in the Tafsīr. He says this dream. So yeah, in the Qur'an, these are all examples of amplification. In his translation of 1230, the Qur'an says, وَقَالَ نِسْوَةٌ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ, and Robert translates, Inc inter mulieres civitatis crebra confabulatio est dicentes. And we see that he clearly in the Qur'an, وَقَالَ نِسْوَةٌ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ, and the women of the city said. That's it. But we find in the translation crebra confabulatio, which is found in the Tafsīr, وَشَعَّ الْحَدِيثُ فِي الْقَرْيَةِ وَتَحَدَّثَ النِّسَاء بِأَمْرِهِ وَأَمْرِهَا وَقُلْنَا. وَشَعَّ الْحَدِيث, well, hadith is the happening, the thing which happened and which we relate, but it is also found in the section of gossip. So I'm suggesting that Robert translated al-hadith for washa'a al-hadith for crebra confabulatio, for example. This next one is the one where he clarifies the syntax and the whole meaning of a verse. It's the part where God states that he's going to relate to Muhammad the best of stories. وَنَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ بِمَا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ وَإِن كُنْتَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ لَمِنَ الْغَافِلِينَ. So we will relate to you the best of stories through this part, بِمَا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ. It's a part of the text which is of difficult interpretation, and Robert gets rid of it, like based on the Tafsīr. He only translates very literally, as you may say. Nunc autem omnium verborum tibi missorum pulcherrimum enarrabo iis qui prius negligentes adque secordes extiterant. So now I will narrate the best of all stories that have been sent to you, to those who were beforehand careless and negligent. So, following Tabari, he mixes نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص with وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين. He gets rid of بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن, and he also transforms the receiver of the story in the Qur'an. he who receives the story is the prophet, but in Robert's translation it is those who are negligent. So these also may be associated with the Tafsīr. In the Tafsīr, Al-Tabari says, Sa'id suggests, based on Qatada, that it means, we will relate to you the best of stories of the books that came before and of the old matters of God with the people. I mixed up. These brackets are Al-Tabari, what Al-Tabari is saying. For you were beforehand of those who are not aware. So Tabari makes the same as Robert. He gets rid in this part of Bima awhayna ilayka hadha al-Qur'an, and he only lives, he ties up together. We will relate to you the best of stories, for you were beforehand of those who are not aware. And Tabari also states, it is to be remembered that this ayah descended upon the Prophet, peace be upon him, due to the request made to him by his companions that he related a story to them. So I'm thinking that Robert preferred to not to think of the Prophet as the receiver of the Qur'an, but that this story was meant for the whole humanity. I'm gonna hurry up. He translates a hadith with verborum, probably, in my opinion, based on the word kalam, which Tabari suggests. He translates shahid, witness, with iudex, based also, as I think, in Tabari's interpretation, that he states that this shahid, it's really a hakim, so Robert translates iudex. So, we arrive to this place. In this section, the women of the man who bought Joseph, the woman tries to seduce him. There's some gossip around in town. This woman brings the women of Egypt to her house, makes Joseph appear before them, and when they see Joseph, they akbarnahu. They exalt him, they consider him great, here's the translation. وقالت the woman from Egypt, أخرج عليهن فلما رأيناه أكبرناه. They consider him great, they got their hands and this and that. And Robert translates Quoviso omnes menstruatae sunt. And I was just like left perplexed because I was wondering, oh my God, why Robert translated this verb which is so transparent like omnes menstruatae sunt. And that is because Tabari says, Abdusama, the son of Ali al-Hashimi, suggests, based on his father, who was based on his grandfather, that the following saying by God, and when they saw him, they considered him great, means they menstruated. And he goes on and on and on. And Tabari doesn't really like this interpretation. He states that no, this can be, they aren't aroused by him or anything like that. And it also... Tabari, the first interpretation that Tabari shows to us of the verb is that Tabari tells us that the verb akbara means a'zama or ajlala. But akbara, as I think, it's a very transparent verb. I would understand it. And I'm no expert of Arabic myself, I've studied it. But I think that the verb akbara, it's like for beginners, you know, like he considered, to consider great someone. He proposes the synonyms a'zama, ajlala. He states, if you go to the Tafsīr, he repeatedly states that the verb akbara means a'zama, here and there. So I'm just wondering, why did Robert pick this such an obscure interpretation and such an emphatic interpretation of the verb? And I suppose that it was because he was trying to point out that the Qur'an, it's a text of unchaste content, which would lead us to nuance perhaps the Burman's interpretation that just because Robert resorted to the Tafsīr, he was intending for his translation to reflect what Muslims thought of the sacred text. Robert succeeded, and one of the glosses in Bibliander's edition, in this very part, Quovis omnes menstruatae sunt, and Bibliander puts sophedum et obscenum prophetam. So yeah, Robert kind of succeeded on his with his intention, as I think. And yeah, this is the conclusion. In his translation of the first 57 verses of the chapter 12 of the Qur'an, Robert indeed shows, with his use of At-Tabari's Tafsīr, the uninterested translating spirit that Burman attributes to him. For the most part, he resorted to the Tafsīr in order to clarify the meaning of the text. Nevertheless, in his translation of 1231, Robert clearly intends to portray the Qur'an in a bad light, but this is not done by an ad libitum choice in his translating process. Rather, he resorts to an obscure interpretation of the verb akbara, which allows him both to render the Qur'an correctly, following the interpretation of At-Tabari, and at the same time to present it as a text of unchaste content. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we can go on with our first speaker, who is Privatdozent Friedrich Hasselhoff, and he will speak about Hamormati and the Qur'an, a new look on his work.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation here.